Recording in progress.
Board of Managers regular meeting agenda here. It's June 12th, 2024, 9 a.m. We're at the Shoreview City Hall Council chambers. I will note that two of our members are absent with prior notice, Marcy Wynant and Steve Wagaman. Otherwise, we have a quorum and we will move forward. Can I have a motion to set the agenda? I understand there are no proposed changes by the
Mr. President, I move to set the agenda as it is.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Okay. Consent agenda.
Do you want me to approve the board
Oh,
minutes
shoot.
first from the previous?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
All right, Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the May 22nd, 2024 regular meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. So that takes us to the consent agenda. Patrick?
Perfect. Thank you, President Bradley. I have a couple of changes here to the ER, so I'm going to share the screen just so everyone can follow along. Essentially for this project, since we put the engineer's report into the packet, they submitted an updated final plan. It added an additional patio area, so we've got some minor changes to the numbers in here, and that would also satisfy the only proposed conditional item. So we would also be moving straight to approval following the meeting. So I've got them in red line here, so I can just kind of go through it. The amount of impervious surface slightly increased on this line here. I'm sorry, this is page 14 of the packet if you would like to follow along, but we would switch the recommendation from CapRock to approval. On the next page, we would update the exhibit to include the final plan set that we received after the packet. Again, down in the description section, to be consistent with above, the amount of impervious surface slightly increases. And then in the stormwater section, we're identifying that the amount of treatment that they would be required to provide does slightly increase. It doesn't change anything with their design, as they already have additional volume than they need, but just to track that information. And I think that would be it. Yes, it's those changes.
All right. Are there any questions of Patrick? If not, I will move approval of permit request 24-034.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
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 All right, that passes 3-0. That takes us then to Molly.
Okay, good morning, Mr. President, Board of Managers. For your consideration today under consent agenda, we have the water quality grant application A24-02. The applicant is the City of Fridley. This is a road reconstruction partnership for 4 separate rain gardens on private property. Since there were no board members present at the CAC meeting, I'll just give a little overview of what we discussed. The CAC were supportive and recommended the application to the board with a motion of 7-0. And there was just one significant question that one of the members had about the project. So I mentioned in my memo that this project is in conjunction with the Stormwater Management Grant Hydrodynamic Separator, which is in a similar area. And Rachel, working with the City of Fridley, just provided some clarification that the hydrodynamic separator does not have as much volume control as they would have liked to see. So these rain gardens definitely help contribute to that amount. They also have significant water quality benefit. This location is right directly south of the lower Rice Creek, which is a critical area for the watershed, as it's kind of the last area before all the water dumps out into the Mississippi River. I'll just provide a little bit of clarification on the bids and cost estimates that I have presented for you. So the city and Anoka Conservation District and Rice Creek staff met about a month ago to discuss kind of our plan of action, because the road reconstruction work is set to take place directly after July 4th. But that creates a little bit of difficulty with our timeline for approval for grants, because we do not meet with the CAC in July. So it's either June or August that we get approvals through. And so the city has not yet sent out a solicit for a bid for the landscaping contractor for the rain garden. So right now we have the road contractor at $11,508.76. The Anoka Conservation District presented a cost estimate with a 10% contingency at $51,173.76. And then the city will send out the bid package as soon as they're able. And once we receive information of the final contractor and amount, the CAC did request to see those numbers. However, they don't require any further action on their end from that. But it was calculated that with the 75% cost share for the curb cut rain gardens, each garden will max out at the $7,500 amount that we allow. So both Rice Creek staff and Anoka Conservation District staff are comfortable with this application in this format. If you have any other questions, I'm happy to clarify for you.
Anyone have questions? Well, I just want, so this is paying for both the curb cuts and the gardens.
Yes.
Can I'll move approval of the proposed, looking for the number. I move to authorize the administrator on advice of council and approve the water quality grant contract of $30,000 not to exceed 75% of eligible project costs, or up to $7,500 per rain garden. There are 4 of them. Whichever amount is lower is outlined in the consent agenda and in accordance with RCWD staff's recommendations and established program guidelines.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Molly. Okay, open mic. Do we have anyone online? Not, I recognize the 2 people in the audience as ours, so we will move on to the next item, which is Solitude Lake Management Partial Pay Request. Matt.
Good morning. Patrick, am I able to share my screen? I am. Thank you. Excellent. There we go. Okay, President Bradley, members of the board, thanks for having me today. We have a pay application for our Centerville Lake alum treatment. This also provides an opportunity for me to give you a little update on how the project is going. So I've got a few slides to lead you through our current status in this project. So what we're doing here today, I'll give you a brief update on phase 1, which we just completed of this project, and our pay request for Solitude Lake Management. So you'll all recall, of course, the problem here with this project is excessive algae blooms in Centerville Lake. That's what's driving this project. A series of diagnostic studies, again, identified that internal loading from sediment phosphorus was the primary driver in these algae blooms. This is all review for the board members, so you've heard this before. We were awarded a Clean Water Fund grant, $954,000 to help pay for this project. That's funding approximately 85 to 90% of this project. We do have several great project partners here: Anoka County Parks, the cities of Centerville and Lino Lakes, and St. Paul Regional Water Services. Anoka County Parks and the cities of Centerville and Lino Lakes are financial partners. St. Paul Regional Water Services is partnered with us providing access to the lake. And as you'll recall, Bar Engineering is our project engineer, and our contractor, Solitude Lake Management. They were previously HAB Aquatic Services, who did the alum treatment on Bald Eagle Lake. They've since switched their name to Solitude Lake Management. You'll recall that we had a public meeting on April 11th, 2024 with lake residents. That was well attended, mostly with Lake Association folks from Centerville Lake, but that was a good meeting. Some good questions and enthusiasm for the project there. Remind everyone again that the alum application is being done in the deeper portion of Centerville Lake. So everything greater than 10 feet which is that shaded area that you see there over Centerville Lake. So we're treating 284 acres total, and we're applying approximately, or just shy actually, of 400,000 gallons of aluminum sulfate or alum. Each phase, again, we're doing it in 2 phases, 2024 we just completed, and again in 2026, each phase is applying roughly half of that total dose of alum. So the board, at the last time we heard about this at a board meeting, the board was approving the contract with Solitude Lake Management. They began work on May 13th, showed up to the site at Centerville Lake on May 13th. This is where I get to give some praise to Anoka County Parks for being a great partner. That park, the Anoka County Chain of Lakes Regional Park, was under major construction at the time of access here. And yet the park and their contractor, Peterson, found a way to get us through that construction area and into the park to be able to launch the alum application barge, which is what you see happening here. So thank you to Anoka County Parks. Thank you to Peterson Construction for getting us through during that construction project. Here's another photo of the barge after it's been launched. You'll notice it looks like it's riding pretty high in the water. It is, of course, because it's totally empty. This is before, of course, it's been filled up with alum or anything's been started. On the right-hand side there, you see some temporary storage tanks being delivered to a property owned by St. Paul Regional Water Services on the eastern side of Centerville Lake. So although, again, the barge was launched out of the park there, all of the staging was done over at the St. Paul Regional Water Services side on the other side of the lake. That's where these tanks were delivered to. And then tanker trucks, not sure if you can see my pointer maybe. Yeah, kind of. Tanker trucks would come by on the street right up here and pump the alum into the temporary tanks. Then the alum would go from the temporary tanks into the barge to be applied on the lake. We got some great aerial photos and video thanks to Houston Engineering. Came out with her drone just for about an hour or so, and we got a whole bunch of really great photos and video of the site here. What we're looking at here is the alum barge just finishing up an application run. So you can see the alum in the water. That's kind of that milky white substance in the water. The aluminum, well, I'll talk more about it in the next slide, but I think what I wanted to note here was that you can see the barge is turning around and heading back towards shore. All of those tanks that you saw on the barge, and maybe I'll flip backward again so you can see the barge, has a number of large storage tanks on it. Seems like a lot of aluminum sulfate, but this pass that they just did right here, one swipe across the lake, and they would empty all of those tanks. So the tanker truck that I mentioned that was coming by in the street, there were actually 5 to 6 of those a day coming to refuel the temporary tanks that would then go into the barge. So one swipe like this, and then the barge was returning to land. So they had long days on the water. They would typically be out applying alum for 8 to 10 hours a day. This is Solitude Lake Management again. Here's a closer up view of the barge applying the alum. So the product, of course, as we've talked about, is aluminum sulfate. As aluminum sulfate is applied to the water, it hydrolyzes and turns into aluminum hydroxide, which is what you see happening in the water there. So the process is fast, but not instantaneous. There's a short time where the alum's in the water and it's converting to aluminum hydroxide, and it creates that milky white flock that you see there. That's only in the water for maybe, I mean, you can only visually see it in the water column for maybe an hour or so. And by that point, it's sinking down to the bottom of the lake into the lake sediments, which of course is where we want it to be. There's a fair amount of monitoring that was done during this project, primarily pH monitoring. I'll go back and note, during this hydrolysis process where aluminum sulfate is transitioning into aluminum hydroxide, releases free hydrogen ions, which pushes the pH down. That can be a little bit concerning, making sure that the pH doesn't drop too far. So we actually have the contractor monitoring pH, and we, the Watershed District staff, are out on the lake measuring pH at multiple times during the application to make sure the pH doesn't drop too far. There's a number of safeguards in place here. They do jar tests every day to ensure that their dose is not going to push the pH too low. But regardless, we do all of this monitoring, the belt and suspenders approach, as we called it before. The good news, we didn't really see any pH issues here. We've got maybe a few changes to be even safer than we were, or more cautious than we were in the first application for the second round, but no real concerns here with pH. So at this point, this was early June now. Actually, let's see, I'll note here, the date that they completed the alum application was May 21st. By early June, all of the equipment is off of the site. Solitude is completely, has all of their equipment out. The rain for rent tanks where they stored the alum on the shoreline is out. What we're looking at on the right here, this is really the only remnant of the project or impact that we've made to the site is some tire rutting in the grass here. We're in contact with St. Paul Regional Water Services, and we might need to show up to do just a little bit of smoothing and reseeding of grass, but that's really the only impact that we've had to either one of the sites on the project, so that's good. So that's a quick review of what we were doing. In terms of the pay application, the project engineer, Barr, has received and reviewed all of the submittals that are required by the specifications. Like I mentioned, we did all the pH monitoring and jar tests. We have the bill of lading, which is when the chemical company delivers the alum to the site. There's essentially a receipt. Barr has checked all of those to ensure proper volumes have been applied. We have all of the alum application maps, and everything is in order. So we have received this invoice, $464,000, $65.30. This is slightly less than half of the total project. I mentioned that the two phases are applying half of the dose. This first invoice is just slightly less than the second invoice because the second alum application in 2026 includes a minor increase for inflation. So at this point, Barr Engineering is recommending full payment of the invoice. Rice Creek staff concur. Page, oh, I'm sorry, it's not page 5 of your packet. This is page 50. There should be a 0 behind that. Page 50 of your packet has the motion. It's also listed here for your convenience, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Matt? So Matt, what can you tell us about the results so far?
Results so far is water clarity is way up, which is what we would expect. I'm at this point, there's not much more to say than that. I think over the course of the summer, as we continue our monitoring program, the summary at the end of the year will be the most illuminating. We're actually going to be out on Centerville Lake tomorrow as part of our regular monitoring. And I should mention, next steps and monitoring steps for this project. We are out, of course, throughout the course of the summer, collecting water samples every 2 weeks. We're going to be doing sediment collection next summer, 2025, to, again, look at sediment phosphorus release rates out of the sediment. And with all of that information, we can make minor adjustments to phase 2 if necessary. But back to your question, so far the water clarity is way up.
Cool. Any other questions? Not going to have a motion, please.
Oh, I'd love to do it since we're all just going to agree to it anyways. I would move to approve the partial payment to Solitude Lake Management for the Centerville Lake Alum project in the amount of $464,6530.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 No opposed, 3-0. Fabulous job. Thank you.
Thank you.
So can I take, on behalf of all the Bald Eagle people, so weeds are up, but they're up their proper level because the water's up. If the water stays up, are we seeing, have we maxed out on the weeds yet for this summer?
Yeah, Manager Bradley, there has been the typical treatment for curly leaf pondweed on Bald Eagle Lake. I believe this survey for Eurasian water milfoil is either done or about to be done.
Okay.
I haven't seen results of the other plant surveys yet, but we're probably reaching, closer to maximum plant growth earlier in the year just because of the early ice off and the growth season started a little bit earlier.
So I'm going to keep praying for a little bit of rain every week so that they stays at the proper level. Last year where the water dropped 1.5 feet and those weeds had nowhere to go but the surface. So it's okay. Any other questions? Thank you. So the next item is the Jacon LLC partial payment request. Tom?
Yes, thank you, Manager Bradley and board managers.
You got it on the first try that time.
Yeah,
That's why I asked. him
awesome.
before.
Still say you had too.
For your consideration is the partial pay request for JCON LLC for the WJD 3 branch 1, 2, and 4 repair. The work started in 2023, but most of the work has occurred this year in 2024. They've been working toward final wrap up of the project. The project is substantially completed. They're just finishing the final punch list items. And they've submitted a partial pay request of $21,047.25. And the engineer has provided a recommendation memo that the request is accurate and staff concurs and recommends that we issue the payment to JCON.
Any
By
questions?
we, I mean you, of course, excuse me.
Any questions of Tom?
Mr. President,
Please.
I'll move to approve JCON LLC's partial payment request number 5 as submitted and certified by the district engineer and staff, direct staff, to issue the payment in the amount of $21,047.25.
And I will second that. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Do you have something?
3-0.
I think, yeah.
You can have questions.
No, it's over now, Chris.
Just a comment for the board. Just wanted to note that, again, we're expecting one more request for payment from them, the final one. And, you know, I think the biggest thing will be just getting the final documents from them for the protection of the district with the contract, like the lien waivers and other state required documents. So once we get those, then we can confirm that any of the punch list items are done, and we'd anticipate next month sometime that'd be coming forward to close that project out.
Any questions? All right, thank you. That one, I believe, takes us to the check register. On behalf of Marcy, I'll say, there it is.
Well said.
If you have any questions, I'm sure that the staff can answer them. So I would move approval of the check register dated June 12, 2024, in the amount of $134,194.40.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Matt, you're back up. Common carp management. Dueling podiums.
One second as I share my screen again. There we go. And there we go. Okay, President Bradley, members of the board, thanks again for having me. A brief update on our carp management program. So springtime is the time where most of the work is done in this program. So I can provide an update on the spring operations and kind of where we're at with our carp management program in Long Lake and the Lino chain of lakes. Had a short memo, I think, beginning on page 62 that provided some background. And I'm noting now that since I wrote this memo on June 5th, we have an update in some of the numbers. So some of the numbers that I might be presenting here in my slides would be a little bit different than in the memo. They just reflect updated numbers as our operations continue. Reminder again, we're managing common carp. The reason for this is because they contribute to algae blooms. They are an invasive species, but the reason that we manage them is because of their impact on water clarity and algae blooms. The district has a carp management plan and a specific plan for the Long Lake Lino chain of lakes. most recently revised in 2022. We continue to implement this. We've got some notes on this and perhaps an update that could be coming next year toward the end of my slides here. Again, a reminder that our aim in managing these common carp is to manage them below the impact threshold, which is roughly set at 100 kilograms per hectare. So when there's more carp than that, like what we started with in the Lino chain of lakes, roughly 6 to 7 times that, they impact water clarity, most definitely. But they tend to not impact water clarity once you manage their numbers down below that impact threshold. So that is our goal, is to manage them below that impact threshold. Now, previously, from 2020 to 2022, we had a huge drop from about 670 kilograms per hectare down to 102. Last year, our estimate was pushing us well down below our goal. So for the first time last year, we were meeting our long-term management goal with this, which was really great news. Initially, we were thinking that it might take up to 5 years to hit this goal, and really we were hitting it in more like 4. So we were making really good progress here. A reminder of what our management plan is, or what we focus on. It's removing at least 50% of the adult carp annually and suppressing reproduction by blocking migration to carp nursery areas where they would spawn and where the young carp would grow. Our keywords in our management plan are effective, efficient, and reliable. For all of our management tools and our operations, those are the test words that we use. And our management plan is consistently implemented. We're doing it every year, but a flexible approach. And I think there's an opportunity for us to flex a little bit next year and make some improvements as we go along. So our primary management tool remains at our site on Rice Creek. This is on Rice Creek, just upstream of Long Lake. We use an electric barrier system, or a Neptune system, to guide migrating fish. So the fish, again, would be migrating from Long Lake up to the Lino chain of lakes. We're blocking them and pushing them into a pen, which you can kind of see there, made out of black PVC, and then using this electric herding system to guide them up into a conveyor belt where they're then removed. Here's an aerial view again of that system. So carp would be migrating from the top of your screen to the bottom of your screen, upstream in this case, encountering that low voltage electric barrier and being pushed into the trap. And actually, if you can see my cursor here, we've made some changes already to the way that this trap looks. So again, our approach here is consistent. We're doing it every year, but we're flexible in how we implement it. The size of this trap was just a little bit too big and unruly. Carp Solutions this past off-season made some changes to the layout. It still functions essentially the same way, but for example, the conveyor belts, which you can kind of see at the top end of the trap, are now at the other side of the trap. It looks a little bit different, so we're constantly making minor adjustments and improvements to this process as we go along. The other part of our management plan is this fairly new physical barrier on Johanna Creek. Many of the managers have seen this. This is just outside of the New Brighton Community Center. This was just installed in 2023, or early 2020, yeah, early 2023. Here's a look at the barrier after it was installed, and I'm going to jump right to the numbers that we have for the past few years here. So this is a chart showing the total number of carp removed from 2016 all the way up to this year, and our total number through 2024. So we're up over nearly 57,000 carp. That's not pounds, but carp removed from the system since we started. Roughly 400,000 pounds or 200 tons. That's a lot of carp. Recall that our management goal every year is to remove at least 50% of the migrating individuals. This year we're down a little bit, both in the numbers of total carp removed and the percentage of the population. I think the big reason for this is that the carp population is way down. There's just far fewer of them. But to get that percentage up back into our sweet spot of around 50%, we do have some ideas for next year. So here's where we're at now. I've added another number here to your screen. Let's see if we can see it. Pointing at it now with my cursor. Our 2024 estimate is up a little bit from 2023. Couple things here though. This is still a rough number. We actually use multiple population estimates throughout the course of the year and then combine all of those and take an average of some sort. So this is a very initial estimate, rough numbers. It does appear to be up a little bit, but I think I note this in the next thing here. This increase is probably more likely just a variability in population estimate and not an actual population increase. Of course, it is possible for the population to fluctuate and go up and down, but it's really difficult to estimate the size of a wild population of animals. You know, with our monitoring program, we put error bars around our estimates of phosphorus and chlorophyll A and things like that. And of course, smaller error bars are better. Less variability gives us more confidence in our estimate. This is really hard to do, is to get tight error bars or low variability on these estimates. So most likely, what we're seeing here with this higher number in 2024 is just variability in estimate. But the take-home message is that we remain near or below our long-term management goal. So we're still in very good shape here. And the last bullet point here, stay the course. So we continue to implement this program. We are still meeting our goals. This was I believe I've shared this with the board before, but this was actually a population model, so a computer model that was developed with Carp Solutions and the University of Minnesota, where they can estimate the carp biomass in a system given certain scenarios. So the scenario that we're looking at here is our management goal, 50% adult removal, and we're suppressing recruitment or reproduction. And what we see in these model runs is that the population still varies, but as long as we consistently implement it, then after about year 4 to year 8 or 7 or so, most of these computer model runs are showing us below our management goal. You know, we use these computer models to help guide our management decisions, but in this case, it seemed to work pretty well. The actual carp biomass estimates are following this computer model fairly closely. So the carp population still varies in the future, but as long as we're implementing our plan, we continue to maintain our goal. A couple of other notes from this year. That Johanna Creek barrier, the one by the New Brighton Community Center, is proving to be even more important than we thought it was when we installed it. So we thought that it was going to be important, but what we're seeing now with the data that we have from this year is perhaps, I think we were thinking something like 5 to 10% of the population might migrate up Johanna Creek. What we were seeing this year was closer to 20 to 30% of the carp population now attempts to migrate up Johanna Creek. And this is an interesting note here. Migrate up Johanna Creek instead or in addition to Rice Creek. So we monitor these fish movements with pit tags and pit antennas. So there's a number of carp in the system that have these tiny transmitters. They're passive integrated transmitters, and we have antennas that can monitor their movement. So we know that when there's fish showing up to the Rice Creek site, we know when there's fish showing up to the Johanna Creek site. Each one of those tags has an individual ID number for that fish. Some of these migrating carp are showing up first to the Rice Creek site. When they can't get through there, they'll swim down to the Johanna Creek site, and they might go back and forth a number of times, or they show up to Johanna Creek first and then go to Rice Creek. That's some pretty interesting behavior, actually. And it's not clear entirely if they have a preferred migratory site or if it's more opportunistic. But the bottom line here is that the Johanna Creek barrier is proving to be even more important than we thought it was, because a high percentage of the population has been migrating up Johanna Creek this year. Unfortunately, what we had this year is a whole lot of rain. So here is the barrier at Johanna Creek shortly after it was installed. And on the right-hand side there, the barrier after a succession of 2 to 3 inch rainfalls that we had earlier this spring in that area. So the design for this barrier, Houston put this together for us. Of course, one of the things that we have to consider with a barrier like this is that it's not creating any flood conditions upstream were we to have, you know, a 50 or 100-year event or something like this. So the design that we used pushed the upper end of that boundary. We could not install higher gates, a larger barrier, something that takes up more of the cross-section of that channel without affecting flood stage upstream of this location. So we maxed out on our size of this barrier. And yet, we did have, just because of the flooding conditions that we had this spring, we did have a few fish getting past it. Now, this is actually the same design barrier over on JD1 at Bald Eagle Lake. But when water levels are really high like this, those carp can, at least a few of them, if not all of them, can find their way up and over it by jumping, which is what you're seeing in these photos here. So these fish are opportunistic when they show up to the barrier. They might start to show up when the waters are rising, and then right at those peak levels, a few of them can get up and over that. So this is something that we're looking at correcting this next year by perhaps adding, well, first off, I mentioned enlargement of the screens is not possible. We can't go up with the screens or out with the screens. But based on the carp behavior and the way that they work their way up and over these things, they aim right for the edge of that barrier. They can see it. They can see the edge of that barrier, and when they jump, they can aim right for it, and that's how they make their way over it. We think with a slight modification by adding like an L-shaped bracket or an additional L-shaped screen that hangs over the downstream side, even during flood conditions, we're going to be able to stop most of these fish. So that's what we're going to be doing this next year. We like to joke that the barrier we name after Tom. Tom drew up the original design years ago, so the Schmidt barrier. Shemek Bezier from the U of M and Carp Solutions had the idea to add the L bracket, so now we have to call it the Schmidt Bezier barrier after this. One good news is that this year, I don't think I put the numbers on the screen, but before some of these fish at Johanna Creek were able to get up and over the barrier, we'd already removed roughly 300 to 400 of them from the downstream location. So not as many got across the barrier. And actually, after the fish made their way across it, they aggregated on the upstream side of the barrier, trying to make their way back down as water levels declined. We were able to remove another 50 to 75 fish from the upstream side too. So there's some notes on the barriers. Just a note on our Rice Creek site then. We've got some photos here from 2022 and 2024. This is our Neptune electric barrier site. 2022 was a huge removal year. I think we had 14,000 fish removed. This year we're at about 800 or so, something like that from this site. That's mostly because the population is way down. And yet, as I showed earlier, the percentage of the fish that we're removing is also down a bit. So we've got some ideas for making some improvements to that site, like perhaps a one-way fish passage system up into the barrier. So once they move into it, they can't move back out again. But really the keywords efficient, effective, reliable, that efficiency thing is going to be key. Now that we're meeting our long-term management goals, we want to continue to find ways to make sure that the time and money that we spend at this site is being done so efficiently, and we're getting the most fish for the dollars that we're spending. So again, this is where we are in our management plan. We've done the diagnostic, the feasibility work, kind of the program implementation. We got some grants to buy some equipment and infrastructure. Now we're into the long-term operation and management. And we continue to focus on those keywords. So that's the update I had, and happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Matt? Congratulations, Matt. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think if there's no motion or anything we need.
Nope. No,
Okay. So that takes us to the district engineer updates and timelines. Chris, do you want to tell us anything?
Mr. President, I don't have any specifics to add, but certainly can address any questions.
Are there any questions, Chris? Thank you. I believe that takes us to the administrator's update.
Nothing since Monday.
Wow.
That's a good thing, right?
John,
Yeah.
do you wanna-
Mr. President, I did attend the Washington County Consortium meeting along with Administrator Nick and Permit Coordinator Patrick, and if I missed anybody else, I apologize to them. We had a presentation about stormwater working with homeowners associations, and here at Rice Creek, we have a history of that from years ago, where Nick will remember where we worked with the Victor Gardens Homeowners Association for 22 homes, installing some piping alongside so that their basements weren't flooded. And another presentation from the vegetable farmers and the use of tunnels. That's a fancy word of talking about long hoop houses and how that, to grow vegetables in, plastic. Other than that, the construction's going along on the new manure facility at my neighbors, and so even with all the rain, so.
So does this make it less smelly?
I don't know. I don't, it's a mile away from me and it's downhill and
Both good things.
and also I'm not downwind from it either, so. I don't know. It's, that project has been interrupted by a lot of different things and so I'm happy to see it get going and working on it. Even with the weather and the rain, they're pumping the water out of the hole all the time in order to put the concrete in, so. But they're working away at it, so other than that, I don't have anything else to contribute.
Andrew Roberts?
I'm just happy to be here.
And ditto, I too am happy to be here. So with that, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Recording stopped.